All right, so tools you're gonna need: grout float. I like these red gummy floats. They work really well. They're a little more flexible. Personal preference for everyone. That's my old margin. I like the big ones. Grout sponge, nice and clean grout sponge. They last quite a while. They'll last 2-3 jobs. So if you get one and take care of it. Clean bucket for mixing. And most important part, Prism's grout. Love this grout. It is started having some issues with, I call it flashing, but it's discoloration in all of the standard grouts. So they came out with the Prism's grout. It's a fast setting. It dries in about 2 hours, even less on some in some different temperatures and humidities. Awesome stuff. No efflorescence. It says everything right there. Stain resistant, consistent color. So you can grout this and you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be the color that you chose. Other grouts will flash. I call it flash drying, or flash on you, where they'll turn white. Some of the dark colors will turn light. Some of the light colors will turn yellow or dark. So that's what you do. Clean water, lukewarm, cold. Cold if you want to give yourself a little more time, lukewarm if you want it to set up a little quicker. So you're going to mix this to about a smooth peanut butter consistency. I use the same trick. If I can get it on my float after I've mixed it and hang it upside down and give it a little shake and it stays on my float, that's just how I like it. So if it drips off or if it's dripping as you're going like this, no good. So I'm gonna go in and prep the rest of the shower, and then I'll mix the stuff up. The only thing with this is you don't have as much time as a normal grout. Once you mix it, pretty much be ready to start grouting right away. So just mix it up really good. I mixed it for about 2 minutes before I turn the camera on, so it's usually about how long it takes. And then you want to let this sit for 5 minutes. It's called slacking. It just lets all the fine cements and the additives that's in the grout to really get saturated with the water. If you don't, if I were just to go inside right now and start spreading this on the wall, the color could be off, meaning that the color didn't get fully saturated. It would definitely dry really quick on the wall. Something about slacking is it'll slack. It soaks in all the fine cements and additives will soak in all the water, and it'll dry really fast. So right after slacking, about 5 minutes into it, you want to mix it again, and then that makes the life of the grout go a lot longer, especially with this fast setting grout. So that's about what you want to do. Just don't touch it for about 5 minutes, come back, mix it one more time, and then you're ready to start spreading. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes. Mixed up the grout again, so it's ready to spread. Just another thing, cover the pan, either paper or drop cloth, whatever you have. That way, while you're working on the walls, you don't have to continually go down and wipe the mortar that's falling on the floor, or risk that it dries too quick down there and becomes clumpy or too sandy. So another thing is if you have areas that are, sometimes you'll have a big joint somewhere, if it's, you know, against a wall somewhere that you don't like, or for this problem I'm having is the surface bullnose that came out was about an 1/8 inch smaller than the field tile. So I could have split the joint so that you wouldn't see it as much, but I ran them on joint, and what I'll do is, right now, since they're a little bit bigger, they're close to 1/4 inch, I fill them, I just fingered in some grout on all the fatter joints that I know I want to be nice and full, so you don't see the difference on them. And that'll help you, in a couple of minutes once you start really spreading. That way you're not digging out your larger joints and making them look even worse. So this will keep them nice and full. You won't even notice that their surface bullnose is a little bit, about 1/8 inch smaller than the rest of the field tile. Another one of my favorite tools, the Werner step ladder. I have another one that's adjustable, but this one just saves you. It's perfect for 8-foot ceilings, which is what you're normally going to be working around. Just enough room to hold a bucket. You can even have 2 up there. And for years, I've always used just 5-gallon buckets and flip them over. Once I got this thing, it was totally changed the game. So get yourself a nice step ladder. They're like 35 bucks. All right. We got a little grout, not falling off your float. Basically, you're just gonna start filling in the joints. 45-degree angle is good. I personally will go in a straight line and just squeeze it in on every joint and then come at a 45-degree angle to get the excess off. You don't want too much drying on the surface, but you'll just go around and fill in all your joints. With this fast drying grout, if this was a soft body or a ceramic tile, you'll only want to spread maybe about twice what's there and stop and start scrubbing down because it'll dry quick. This is a porcelain, so it gives me a little more time. So I'll pretty much spread the whole back wall halfway down. I'll do all my uppers so I can get off this step stool, but I'll do all this first and then turn you back on when I start wiping. So I'll spread this, and then what I like to do is watch it. So I'll come in and I'll touch the grout joint to see when it's getting a little firm. And as long as you clean enough off the surface with your float, don't have a bunch gunked up on here, it's easy to clean once you start the cleaning process. But I'll spread a bunch, and then I'll come in and usually go to like the fattest spot if there's a area that's a little bigger, and feel it. And if it's a little bit firm, then I know I can start sponging. Okay, so I spread a couple rows up top, enough to get me off my ladder. This porcelain is a little bit, it's a matte, so it's a little bit dry on the surface, so it's already starting to dry up pretty good. So you'll see at first it looks similar to that, where, I don't know if you can really see it, but it's not real uniform. It's just kind of dirty and you got stuff all over. And your next step, take your sponge. You're supposed to be wearing rubber gloves. Always safety first. So take a sponge, and you don't want this thing wet. Look, I'm shaking it. There's no water coming off. So squeeze it out really good. You're going to start with very lightly in a circular motion on a diagonal. You don't want to run up and down the line because you're just going to wipe it out. So if you can manage to go at an angle and in a circular motion, and I'm just going to go really nice and light. So it's basically just barely I'm not pushing on the sponge real hard at all. And I'm just going to do this rough wash. And it's basically just getting the haze off. You can see some areas right there where it's a little bit hazy. And I'm just gonna wipe that, pretty much wiping it off the surface of the main tile. And so I'll do this around the whole thing. And you'll start getting a little bit of grout on your sponge, which is good. It'll help to fill any voids and any little bubbles. So you don't need to wipe it, wash it off as you're doing this first part of it. And don't worry too much about the grout joint as much as just lightly sponging off the surface. You can watch the grout joint as you're going and start to form it. And then after you get it cleaned up pretty good, which I'll do, I'm gonna go around and do the whole thing. I'll show you what we do next. So got the initial wipe done. You're just gonna get your sponge nice and clean and dry and wipe at a 45-degree angle on the tile, and you're going to be watching your grout joints as you're doing it to make sure there's no lines, no holes, no voids, and you'll just go around like that. not much water on it. You don't want drops of water to come down the tile and they can pool up in your grout and it'll leave little holes or whatnot, or it'll leave streak marks. The other thing, you want your corners nice and full. You don't want them rounded, but you want them full, and you can either use a margin trowel or something flat to cut it. I personally like to use my finger, and I'll use it basically like that. It pushes it all in there, and then take the sponge and just do a nice wipe on it. And it always makes a nice clean corner, especially up in your corners at the top. You don't want a big rounded glob in there when you're doing your dishes back in here. So just take time, use a tool if you're wearing gloves, or use your hand, and just make sure that round is nice and full. That's my pet peeve when I see a grout job and the corners are not perfect. Okay, so same thing on the pan. You'll spread your grout and take it at an angle, clean off the majority of it, basically so it looks like it does here. And then out there on that half of it, I've already done the initial wipe, which will start looking like that, and then you'll take your sponge and just go in circular motions till it looks something like that. And then you'll take clean sponge at a diagonal. And when it's a mosaic like this, there's a lot more joints that are picking up the grout as you're swiping. So in one area, you'll probably have to do 2 or 3 and get something like that. And then all the walls and this area, with this grout, you can let it sit about an hour or 2, and then you'll want to clean wipe it, because it looks clean, but there is haze if you look at it in certain lights, and there's haze on the walls. So pans are usually the funnest one when you have mosaics, because you just have to wipe and wipe and wipe, and don't put just as little as water on your sponge as possible as you're wiping, so that you don't cause yourself more issues. Alrighty, so it's all been wiped. So we let it sit about an hour to 2. You can do that same trick as poke the grout joints every once in a while. Not real hard, you don't want to make a dent in it, but you can every once in a while just lightly put your finger on it just to make sure that it's if it's too wet or whatnot. But after that's all done, we'll come in and clean wipe again. Just the same thing, sponge, clean bucket of water, or you can actually use cheesecloth and stuff like that. I like to just let it dry up really good, and then use a sponge, clean wipe the whole thing one more time, and then I'll look at it, and it might need a little bit of a towel or cheesecloth after that final clean wipe. I'm not sure if you can tell, but the corners, like I was saying, all the corners are really really nice and clean. There's no big bulges coming out of the corners. They're all, we still need to do another clean wipe, but they're all nice and clean cut corners, not rounded. So we'll let it dry up about an hour, maybe a little more, and then come and clean wipe one more time. Then we'll get started on the glass.